Why hello there! You may recall some time ago, we made an anime tier list where one of the animes we spoke about was Higurashi, one of my all-time favorite anime shows. So I thought it would only be fitting I made a video essay dedicated to one of the driving plot points of this show, the Hinamizawa Syndrome, named after Hinamizawa Village. Before I start my essay though, I do want to preface that if you suffer from paranoia, hypochondria, or other extreme anxiety disorders, you might want to skip this one. In this video, I'll stick to information we learn in Higurashi and Higurashi Kai since I'm most familiar with those, and since later seasons seem to focus more on the time looping aspect of the show rather than the disease. I'll first talk about the 5 levels of the Hinamizawa Syndrome, so I can cover it more easily. Afterwards, I'll quickly cover the origin of Hinamizawa and Oyashiro-sama's curse, as these are tied to the disease. After this, I'll talk about Takano's research and the medical research it led to. Don't worry, I'll show headshots of characters I mention. After this, I'll address some misconceptions about Oyashiro-sama's curse, as well as misconceptions and my own speculations about the Hinamizawa Syndrome. Finally, I'll wrap up what the Hinamizawa Syndrome actually is, based on what we know about it from the show and my own speculations. So, buckle up, people. You're in for a wild ride. To be able to talk more about the disease, we must first start with how it presents itself in those infected. The Hinamizawa Syndrome operates in 5 levels. To talk more easily about the disease and the different levels, I'll refer to the Hinamizawa Syndrome as HS and each level as L1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 throughout the rest of this video. L1 and 2 are largely dormant. The infected can live peacefully and unaffected in this stage. In L3, the infected starts deteriorating and will become mentally and emotionally unstable, which makes the condition susceptible to worsening. In L4, the infected becomes paranoid and starts suffering from auditory and visual hallucinations. They lose their grasp on reality, and the longer the disease goes untreated, the worse the paranoia and hallucinations become. In L5, the infected suffers a psychotic break from reality. Many of the people we see in the show suffering from this stage will start believing the deity Oyashiro-sama is following them around. They'll hear Oyashiro-sama's footsteps behind them and feel Oyashiro-sama's presence watching them as they sleep. People with L5 will also start suffering from formication, which is a condition where people believe insects are living and crawling under their skin. People infected with HS specifically get the sensation of maggots crawling under their skin, especially in their wrists and in their lymph glands in their throat. Because of the extreme paranoia, the infected is unable to tell friend from foe and will feel antagonized and distrustful of virtually everyone around them. As a defense mechanism, the infected end up killing people, and the formication make them claw so hard at their throat to get rid of the maggots they end up clawing their throat open and bleeding to death. Before we dive too deep into HS itself, I'll talk a bit about the legend surrounding Hinamizawa's origin and Oyashiro-sama's curse. This will be done partially because people with HS have had hallucinations and paranoia tied to Oyashiro-sama's curse in L4 and 5, and because Takano's report contains information on how the curse is used to keep the infection in Hinamizawa. More on that later. It's believed that Hinamizawa was called Onigafuji Village during the Meiji era, which stretched from 23rd of October 1868 to 13th of July 1912. The village might have been named after a supposedly bottomless swamp by the name Onigafuji Swamp, or in some translations, Onigafuji Marsh. According to the legends, human-eating demons emerged from the swamp one day and would terrorize the people of the village. They would slice out humans' intestines and drift them down the river. This was when the deity Oyashiro-sama appeared. Oyashiro-sama wasn't pleased with the demons eating people at all, so the deity gave the demons human form to coexist with the villagers. However, as protector of the village, Oyashiro-sama made it taboo to leave the village, and no strangers were allowed inside either. In order to appease Oyashiro-sama, the people of the village developed the Cotton Drifting Festival, which takes place every year on the 19th of June. During the Cotton Drifting Festival, the priestess of the Furude Shrine will use a tool to carve cotton, which the villagers shape into cotton balls and drift down the river, mirroring the practice of the demons when they cut humans' intestines and drifted them down the river. However, every year since 1997, it seems the village has suffered under Oyashiro-sama's curse, and this year of 1983 will be the 5th year. The villagers of Hinamizawa seem to believe Oyashiro-sama to be a vindictive deity who will stop short of nothing to protect the village and its inhabitants. In the year of 1979, Hinamizawa was to be flooded by a dam project. Although majority of the villagers were against the project, a few villagers supported the project since it gave them more financial stability and better job opportunities. These people were seen as traitors to the village, and some of the most outspoken supporters of the project were the Hojo couple. However, on the night of the Cotton Drifting Festival, something mysterious happened. The foreman of the dam construction was found dead, his right arm missing, and one of his employees had disappeared. Shortly after, the dam project was abandoned, and some people started talking about how it was Oyashiro-sama's doing. It was believed Oyashiro-sama had protected the village by putting a curse on the dam constructors. The following year, 1980, on the night of the Cotton Drifting Festival, the Hojo couple toppled off a cliff. While the husband's body was found, the wife's body wasn't. This started the quiet murmurs of Oyashiro-sama's curse and how it worked. One person dies, and one person disappears by being spirited away. The following year, 1981, on the night of the Cotton Drifting Festival, the head of the Furude Shrine suffered a stroke, and his wife wrote a suicide note. It was believed she drowned herself in the Onigafuji swamp, but her body was never retrieved. The Furudes stayed neutral on the dam matters. The following year, 1982, on the night of the Cotton Drifting Festival, the son of the Hojo couple, Satoshi, and his aunt fell victim to Oyashiro-sama's curse. While the aunt died and was believed to be killed by a drug addict, Satoshi disappeared. Now, people started believing Oyashiro-sama cursed traitors of the village, or those who turned their backs on the deity. The final year, 1983, on the night of the Cotton Drifting Festival, Tomitake is found dead with his throat clawed open. Mio Takano is also found dead, burnt in a barrel. The earliest research into the Hinamizawa Syndrome is done by Dr. Hifumi Takano. He starts out doing some research of parasitic brain disease that somehow overtake the human brain and makes people go mad. Although he's aware not many people would like to support the idea of parasites being able to control the human mind, he believes it's important research. Hifumi tries to get funds to look into the existence of a parasite in Hinamizawa, since it could pave the way for research in parasitic infections that overtake the human brain. However, it's heavily implied by one of the board members he presents his research to that he might have mixed in some of the religious legends with his hypothesis on the matter. Determined to see his research bear fruit, Hifumi's granddaughter Mio continues his research after his death. Mio's research springs out from Hifumi's hypothesis that there exists some kind of parasitic infection that is local to Hinamizawa. The hypothesis suggests that the parasite will take over the brain of the infected, making the infected a host for the parasite. The host will be susceptible to developing paranoia, hallucinations, and lashing out. Since the parasite is local to Hinamizawa, Mio hypothesizes that the legend of Oyashiro-sama's origin and curse is used to scare villagers into staying in the village. The reason for this is that people remaining in Hinamizawa will continuously have HSL1 and 2, whereas moving out of the village seems to trigger the later levels. Furthermore, because the disease exists in Hinamizawa, the villagers seem to be acclimated to it, while outsiders visiting the village are believed to be more susceptible to developing HSL5 relatively fast. It seems people have tried to keep the infection contained to Hinamizawa, using Oyashiro-sama's curse and taboo of no one being allowed to leave or enter the village. It's even believed that people tortured each other in the past, though this may be a misinterpretation of dissections to figure out the nature of the disease. Furthermore, when looking at the old legends of human-eating demons, this may very well be a retelling of villagers developing L5 due to the stress of a war at the time and killing each other, until the deity Oyashiro-sama was invented so people would have something to quell their anxiety. By placing a collective fear of Oyashiro-sama and believing there's a way to appease the deity, the Cotton Drifting Festival, people will no longer fear each other, but rather see each other as allies in subduing Oyashiro-sama's anger. While looking into the disease, Mio suggests there might even be a queen carrier of the disease, Rikafurude. If this queen carrier was to die, Mio suggests the villagers will repeat history and kill each other within 48 hours of the queen carrier dying. In other words, the queen might have some kind of pheromone that keeps HS at L1 and 2. Through Takano's research, a clinic by the name Irie Clinic is stationed in Hinamizawa for the purpose of finding a cure for the Hinamizawa Syndrome. In this clinic, Mio acts as a nurse so she can oversee the project which Dr. Irie is put in charge of looking into. It's through this medical research the two find out there are 5 levels to HS and L5 is terminal. Whenever someone dies from HS L5, Mio and Irie do an autopsy to determine the parasite behind the disease, however none can be found. They don't even find a pathogen that could cause HS. This leads the two to theorize that whatever parasite or pathogen is causing this behavior dies with the host. Besides clawing at the throat, we see one of the patients suffering from HS-L5 frothing at the mouth. Furthermore, Mio convinces Irie that Rika is the queen carrier, and they start drawing blood from her to make an antidote with. These blood samples are successfully turned into something akin to a vaccine, although they don't fully cure the symptoms, but only suppress them. People who have deteriorated to L5 will have to have a jab every so often to keep HS at L1 and 2. It also seems the Irie Clinic built onto the idea that HS can be triggered by stress, and one way to get the symptoms under control is to remove the patient from a stressful situation. This theory is supported by Rena, who develops the beginning stages of L5 through the stress of her parents divorcing, and believes herself to be cursed by Oyashiro-sama after moving out of Hinamizawa. Moving back to Hinamizawa eases her symptoms from the beginnings of L5 back to L1 and 2 again. It also seems the symptoms can be suppressed by taking medications. This may possibly be anxiety medications, since paranoia and hallucinations are byproducts of L5, and Hifumi even suggests in the research that people who live healthy lives free of stress and anxiety and depression will not deteriorate into L5. The Irie Clinic also looks into Hifumi's hypothesis that the parasite lives in the frontal lobe of the brain. Although Irie believes this hypothesis to be very plausible and even treats it as the truth throughout his research for a proper vaccine, nothing can be seen in microscopes, not even from a live specimen. This leads Irie to believe the parasite or pathogen is too small to be detected through current means. There are some misconceptions tied to both Oyashiro-sama's curse and HS. If we start with the misconceptions of Oyashiro-sama's curse, the simplest way to put it is, there is no supernatural curse. Although in some arcs, some of the characters believe the Sonosaki family carries out the curse, this also isn't true. Oyashiro-sama's curse is known under another name, the Series of Mysterious Deaths. This is more befitting of what actually happened. Let's first look at the death of the dam chairman and the disappearance of one of his employees in the year 1979. Through exposition in Higurashi Kai, we learned that the chairman of the dam may well have developed HSL5 due to the stress of the protesters of the dam project. He's seen bursting in on his employees drinking beer after work time while swinging a pickaxe. Yikes, I'm glad I don't work for that guy. Without thinking, the employees grab onto whatever tool is near and start beating up the chairman in self-defense until he dies. Well, that's one way of getting rid of your boss. Anyway, one of the employees has a criminal record and doesn't want to go back to jail. He suggests they dismember the body and bury a part each so no one can rat the others out. He's later found and brought to the idiot clinic. He's frothing at the mouth and has clearly developed HSL5. He becomes the clinic's first live specimen for the research, which is of course never disclosed to the public, since it's unethical and everything. The death of the Hojo couple in 1980 was a series of misfortune. The couple had taken their young daughter Satoko on a holiday with them. However, Satoko had started developing distrust towards her parents, and her distrust eventually triggered HSL5, causing her to push her parents off a cliff. She's later admitted to the idiot clinic, but instead of being used as a live specimen, she's used as a test subject for a vaccine. The death of the Furude couple in 1981 is orchestrated by Mio. Yes, the nurse. She orchestrates this because Mrs. Furude wants to redraw consent for the idiot clinic to draw blood from Rika for a cure because she blames them for making Rika ill. Some sources even say Mio did an autopsy on Mrs. Furude to see if she could find more clues to the Hinamizawa Syndrome. The death of Satoshi and Satoko's aunt in 1982 was a murder committed by Satoshi himself. These Hojo kids really be going around killing their family. He killed his aunt because she was abusive towards Satoko and putting the two of them under a great deal of stress. The stress eventually triggers HSL5 in Satoshi, and he's put into a medically induced coma to reduce the symptoms because the medicine the clinic is developing doesn't work on him. In June 1983, the final year, Mio is planning on killing Rika and initiating what is known as Manual 34. To do so, she stages her own death. Her henchmen burned the body the day before it's supposed to be burned, meaning the autopsy will show Mio died the day before the Cotton Drifting Festival, contradicting that multiple people saw her at the festival. She also injects Tsumitake with a bioengineered version of HSL5, causing him to claw his throat until he dies from blood loss. Finally, she performs a ritual killing on Rika, as you do, where she opens her gut to expose her intestines, and shortly after she releases a gas from the Unigafuji swamp that kills villagers. By doing this, she's hoping the board will support the idea of a queen carrier, because if they do that, they will finally have to take Takano's full research seriously. Although a lot of the theories surrounding the Hinamizawa Syndrome are quite plausible, some of them are not. For starters, the idea of a queen carrier has been debunked in some of the arcs, where Rika has been dead for more than 48 hours without HSL5 triggering in any of the villagers, and without the villagers dying mysteriously. Furthermore, something the idiot clinic fails to mention but Rika does, is the suggestion that the disease can be passed down genetically. The idea of the disease being local to Hinamizawa also seems to check out, as we almost only see residents of Hinamizawa deteriorate to L5. Since the queen carrier theory is pretty much debunked in multiple arcs, it seems the pathogen not only lives in the brain, but is also bloodborne. It also seems the pathogen really only evolves into L5 due to high amounts of stress, otherwise it stays dormant. Since the series of mysterious deaths happens each year during the Cotton Drifting Festival on the 19th of June, I'd suggest the disease also seems susceptible to evolve in the hot, humid summer air of Hinamizawa. Since the village has a large swamp and is also low enough to be able to be submerged underwater for a dam project, it also seems likely the pathogen thrives best in certain kinds of humidity. So, I would like to suggest this pathogen is not only triggered by high levels of stress, but also by the hot, humid summer weather that is unique to Hinamizawa, hence why it's local to Hinamizawa. But since we also know Keiji, who moves from the city to Hinamizawa, develops HSL5, it seems it hits anyone entering the village. This matches up with the hostility surrounding Oyashiro-sama's taboo of not entering the village as an outsider and not leaving the village as an insider. However, the only person we know of who lived in the village, moved to the city, and moved back to the village is Rena. Rena developed HSL5 due to the stress of her parents getting a divorce, so the notion that HS will flare up if someone leaves the village might not be true. Though it does seem the pathogen survives in the host even outside the village. There's also the question of people visiting the village, some even annually, seemingly without ever contracting HS. This suggests you must stay in the village for a duration of time to catch the disease. What's even stranger is, despite getting shots of the antidote for HS, Keiichi still develops L5 due to extreme stress, while others who enter the village before the antidote is developed leave without getting HS. This further supports my thought that you need to stay in the village for a prolonged amount of time to develop HS. Since HS might develop faster under the humidity of late summer, I think you not only have to stay in the village for a long period of time, but you also have to be there during the summer. This would support why people only visiting, even if it is during the summer, can leave the village unaffected by HS. This makes me believe it takes time for HS to infest the brain, and if the host leaves the village too soon, the pathogen will die on its own, unable to merge with the host. My guess is that HS somehow is tied to the cicadas that come during the summer, hence the title Higurashi no Nakakoro ni, which roughly translates to when the cicadas cry. However, if this is true, the cicadas that come to Hinamizawa have to be local only to Hinamizawa and not be present in any other region of Japan. As for drawing parallels to the real world, there are some speculations we can rule out about the nature of the disease. Some fans of the show suspect HS might be airborne. I thought this was the case as well, but taking into consideration you can visit for a short amount of time without developing HS, even without a vaccine, I don't think this is very plausible. Some suggest HS is schizophrenia, because a lot of the symptoms are also present in schizophrenics. This seems to coincide with schizophrenia being able to be passed down genetically. However, it doesn't explain how HS is local to Hinamizawa, as anyone can have schizophrenia. According to schizophrenics trying to spread awareness of the condition online, it also seems schizophrenics are much more likely to hurt themselves rather than others during a psychotic break from reality. And what about the parasite theory suggested in the anime itself? Frothing at the mouth is a classic sign of rabies in cartoons. Rabies often isn't detected by the immune system, and it can enter the bloodstream through microscopic wounds. Inside the bloodstream, rabies will start altering the cells until it eventually enters the nervous system and heads for the brain. Rabies specifically target the hippocampus, amygdala, and hypothalamus. The hippocampus is located in the medial temporal lobes, the amygdala in the temporal lobes, and the hypothalamus on the undersurface of the brain. These parts of the brain play a big role in memory, fear, and emotion. Rabies will attack these parts of the brain and alter the way the brain sends out neurotransmitters, turning the host's brain against themselves. Rabies causes the host to lash out at any nearby living thing due to the fear. Human hosts have even been shown to be scared of steam from their own mouths when they breathe. If rabies is not detected and treated, the host will fall into a state of confusion and start hallucinating and lashing out at imagined threats and innocent bystanders. Hosts will start sweating profusely and lose the ability to sleep until they finally become paralyzed. The paralysis will eventually reach the heart and lungs and kill the host. Although a lot of the symptoms line up, it wouldn't make sense for HS to be rabies, since rabies exists in a number of mammals and anyone can get it. Assuming Hifumi is right about the parasite living in the frontal lobe, the placement of the rabies parasite also doesn't add up. Another possible culprit could be the feline parasite, also known as Toxoplasma gondii, or Toxoplasma for short. Toxoplasma's life starts in cat feces and sustains life through a cycle. If the cat feces is picked up by a rat, the parasite will start developing in the rat, until it eventually alters the rat's behavior and makes it sexually aroused by cats. The rats then jump into the claws of cats and die, releasing new parasites to start the cycle all over again. Despite the parasite's origin, an estimated 30 to 50% of the human population is suggested to carry this parasite. What makes this parasite tricky is not only is it incredibly small, but it can stay dormant in its host for decades. Toxoplasma is a neurological parasite. Once it activates, it causes symptoms such as altered activity levels, changes in risk behavior, and decreased reaction times. Furthermore, it's suggested that there's a 30% chance to pass on Toxoplasma to your children if you're infected. What's more is, the research into this parasite is a controversial one, because some people suggest it might explain schizophrenia. This is because medics observed more cases of schizophrenia around the time when people started domesticating cats. However, this could obviously be a wild coincidence. But do be on lookout for them cats. This doesn't diminish the fact that the parasite has been observed to alter the host's behavior, and it's been proven that the parasite in humans alter the signal substance GABA, which is an amino acid that works as a neurotransmitter in the brain. Since research suggests people with this parasite are more susceptible to becoming schizophrenic, I assume the parasite causes hallucinations and paranoia as well, though I can't find any sources on this. Again, this wouldn't make much sense since it's not local. If 30 to 50% of all humans have this parasite in its dormant stage, then clearly it can thrive wherever. Another option could be some type of brain-altering fungus carried by the cicadas, although no real-life research I can find supports the idea that this type of fungus can spread to humans. Furthermore, since legends seem to tie in with HS, the parasite might very well originate from the Waggish swamp, which would make the human-eating demons from the swamp parasites rather than other people on a killing spree. To answer this question, I'll put together what the show tells us about HS and my own speculations. 1. HS is local to Hinamizawa only. It survives and thrives in the climate that is unique to Hinamizawa. 2. Most, if not all, residents of Hinamizawa have L1 and 2. At these stages, HS doesn't show itself. It acts dormant. 3. L3, 4, and 5 are triggered by stressful events and most likely also the humid summer weather of Hinamizawa. 4. HS can survive outside of Hinamizawa if it has merged with its host. 5. HS needs time to merge with the host. If the host is not in Hinamizawa for a prolonged period of time, HS will not take effect. It will die in the host without affecting the host. 6. HS does not only exist in the brain, but is also bloodborne. 7. HS can be passed down genetically. 8. When triggered, HS L3, 4, and 5 can only be calmed down by the antidote. Someone who has deteriorated to these stages needs constant checkups and shots to keep HS at L1 and 2. 9. If you deteriorated to L5 to the point of developing formication, the antidote will not work on you. The only way to save you from killing yourself at this stage is to put you into a medically induced coma which stops HS from attacking the brain. 10. If a person experiences L3, 4, and early stages of L5, and it's triggered by a stressful situation, they can fall back into L1 and 2 by removing themselves from the situation. This, however, leaves them susceptible to developing L5 faster than normal if they go untreated. 11. HS is virtually impossible to detect. However, it's very likely it's some kind of parasite that latches onto the brain and releases toxin into the bloodstream, mixing with the blood. 12. HS dies with its host. 13. HS acts a lot like toxoplasma in the way it's small and stays mostly dormant, but when triggered, it acts more like rabies. And finally, 14. It's plausible HS originates from the Waggish swamp, and if the cicadas of Hinamizawa are unique to Hinamizawa, it's plausible HS is spread by the cicadas. If the cicadas aren't unique to Hinamizawa, HS is most likely spread through bodies of water in the village. So, if you ever think of vacationing in Hinamizawa, make sure not to stay too long, and visit the Irie clinic for an antidote shot first thing you get there. You might also want to stay away from the Waggish swamp and only drink bottled water. Just in case.
Thank you guys so much for watching our video.
If you liked our video, make sure to give it a like, and if you like what we do, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell.
See you guys in the next one.
Bye!